Hello and welcome to Cuts We Love. It's a video series from Ace Cinema Editor where we revisit a scene from a classic movie in the company of the artist who cut it. And for today's dive into the archives, we're looking again at Team America, World Police with the film's editor, Thomas M. Vogt. Hi Tom, how are you doing today?
Hello, sir. How you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. So look, Team America. Never was a film so fearless in puncturing the gung-ho jingoism of US foreign policy. It hits the spot just as much now as it did in the middle of the Gulf War when the film was first released 21 years ago. Tom has been the right-hand man in the edit room for creative team Trey Parker and Matt Stone on countless South Park episodes before tackling this feature with them. The biggest difference, at least on the surface, between South Park and Team America was that the animation is with puppets, not cartoons. So, Tom, perhaps a good starter question for you is what reaction were Parker and Stone expecting from Paramount when they unveiled the first cut of this feature?
Um, we weren't sure how it was going to be the response because at the beginning, I think they just kind of gave us a not a pittance, but we didn't have a huge budget to start with, so we were kind of working with what we had, and I think that kind of wasn't really yielding the best quality stuff. Anyway, so basically, what happened is we started doing. We started working on it, and as I guess halfway through, the some of the Paramount people came over and they saw sort of how the thing was looking, and they really liked it, so they started pumping in some money, which changed. So they had a bit of an idea, but halfway through, they were kind of in the dark about what they were getting.
So, yeah, I mean, so what scene have you chosen for us today to have a look at?
I chose the opening scene, which sort of encompasses the whole. Like it really, as it should, establishes everything. Establishes the genre, which is sort of unique, and establishes the comedy, a strong satire, which is not typical in feature films, and it features puppets, which is not normal. And it was also my first film, fully live action film. I'd done the South Park movie a couple years before. Um, but that was sort of just an extended version of the show. It was just like, I mean, it was much more complicated than that, but it certainly wasn't to the level of complication that the Team America was. There was many hands on deck, and there were many um, yeah, there was just a lot of stuff going on. We had basically had a very short schedule. That was sort of there's a lot of issues going into this. We basically I started working on the scene or the whole movie about a year before in 2003. I think the movie came out in fall of 2004. And we are trying to beat the election, I believe. We also had we were working on the show, the series, South Park. So we had two breaks every year. So I was working pretty much between the show on the animatic. So I started I cut the whole film on an animatic for the year before. And then I believe we started shooting officially in late spring 2004. And Paramount put us on the shortest production schedule in their history. I don't know if they were trying to rush us out the door, or they weren't sure if this was going to make anything or what. But there was a lot of question marks going into this film.
Tell us about the animatic that you worked on. How did that differ from normal animation?
Well, basically, that's sort of my wheelhouse at the time. I had started in animation in San Francisco at this studio called Colossal Pictures, and that was sort of my bread and butter. I started working with this guy named Peter Chung, who did the Rugrats and Spawn or Eon Flux and some other things. So he basically taught me how to edit, and the strength of that at the time was being able to do an animatic, and that was sort of my bread and butter and my whatever. So doing this on the film was just really an extension and sort of the way that I could feel comfortable in approaching a movie because I knew there were yet more things to come that I wasn't sure. And as I mentioned, this was my first full live action feature. So I was learning edge numbers, key codes, interaction with assistants, because pretty much on South Park, as Trey would call it, it's pretty much professional guerrilla filmmaking. It's sort of like, Trey would we would all do different things. Trey would edit, I would do voices, Butters would do, I mean, like it was all just sort of a conglomerate thing. So the approach that we sort of took to the film was very similar, where we started every episode on South Park with an animatic, and they're really short. And obviously, so this one was basically we I think it was some South Park storyboard guys, and maybe we hired another guy to come in, but because it was a risk, I think Paramount wanted to see as much as they could along the way what we were talking about. And the way that this thing started was that we kind of we get we basically wanted to see if this thing worked first. Is obviously from Jerry Anderson and the Thunderbirds. The puppets look similar. I think the eyes are a little bit bigger. We did a lot of motion tests on them with the gyros in their face and speed tests with the film. We didn't shoot at 24 of all things. We shot, I think, at 22 or 23 frames a second. Bill Pope was a cinematographer who did the Matrix films, and I think Scott Rudin picked him, and I was familiar with the Matrix, but we weren't familiar with Bill as a person. He fit right in, and I think that was part of it, was getting this assemblage of people that were sort of like-minded and that kind of understood the vision and whatever. And so again, back to the animatic. With that, we were trying to give all the interested parties as much of a reference for what we were about to do as we could. And so I think that was really tightened up. It was almost like our Bible. And all the while, Trey is writing with Pam Brady and Matt Stone. I believe, all said and done, the page count was 800 or 900 pages for that film, for a 120-page script. So there was a lot of writing going on, which meant a lot of animatic changes. And so it was very similar to South Park, where I would have this beautiful scene laid out, and we would both work on it together, and there would be some new pages that would completely wreck it. So it was all just sort of a house of cards for the longest time until we got it the right way. So
There's quite a few pyrotechnics, sort of in-camera effects going on in this scene, well, in the film as a whole. But how did they evolve? Were you on set to sort of observe this? Yeah.
yeah, that's right. We our studios in South Park are in Marina Del Rey, and we were trying to find someplace close so we could go back there. And at the time, I was the lead editor, I believe, and so I was managing the show as well as the movie. And I think, anyway, so it was back and forth. But we shot it at the Culver Studios, where they did, I believe, Citizen Kane, and maybe it was The Wizard of Oz, one of those old movies. Anyway, so we had sets at Fox, Sony, Culver Studio, and within that we had all these huge sets. We had some of the sets were like 1,000 square feet, and I think that we were using, like, was it Techno Crane, I believe, to get the big tracking pull out shots. And we're basically trying to take advantage of all the things you couldn't do with a full scale film, like miniatures. We were trying to take advantage of that.
Sacré bleu! Grand-Titan! Oh, ouais? Oh, hello! Grand-Titan! Hello, Kility!
Jean-François? Jean-François? Téléjacques,
Achapaha. Alakadurkadurka.
Jean-François, mauvais garçon.
Regardez, maman, on va les en titi.
Mon Dieu!
You in the robes. Put down the weapon of mass destruction and get on the ground. You're under arrest.
Put down your weapons now!
Why can't they ever do this the easy way?
Well, police, get down on the ground!
Hey, terrorist! Terrorize this.
All right, let's make this interesting.
Kia!
You lose. He's getting away with the WMD! I got him! Damn, I missed him! Sarah, he's got the bomb. You gotta fix.
I got him, Carson. He's heading for the Louvre. Your plans are over.
All right, Sarah! Yeah! All right, team!
Nothing to it.
All right! Bonjour, everyone. Don't worry, everything is boom. We stopped the terrorists.
I was doing a lot of thinking on the ride over here.
Oh yeah? About what?
I was thinking that I want you to marry me.
Don't joke about that.
Who's joking?
Joe to Sarah. Looks like we may need to order up a wedding cake.
He finally caught the question?
Lisa, you're an amazing woman. And a damn fine cop. And I want to spend the rest of my life with you.
Oh, Carson. Carson!
Feels so cold.
You have to hang on, Carson.
Sorry, babe. Looks like this was a one-way ticket.
No.
Lisa, you have to live on. Find someone else who will love you. Find someone else and be happy. You deserve it.
So basically, sorry, the preface of that was basically we had the crews from Close Encounters, Star Wars, a lot of the traditional model building and set building houses. We had David Rockwell was the architect. He has famous architect in New York. He did the sets. Karen Patch did the wardrobe. He did Wes Anderson films. So we had all this big crew, and then we had Bill Pope, and he was like, "I just want to shoot everything in camera." And so we all kind of took it as, I think for us on South Park, we sort of took it as a break from the regimen of our, 12, 15, 20-hour days on the show, 7 days a week, to trying something completely different. So when Bill said he wanted to shoot everything in camera, I think yeah, the shark scene. I think the only special effects we did where I added every single gun flare, muzzle flare on the machine guns or anything. That was something I did that wasn't practical. But yeah, the idea was to sort of see how much there's like all these remote controlled cars and yeah, so the thing I think Bill wanted was just to kind of see how it all kind of unfolded in a traditional way. Like we're basically treating it like a regular film. And so um the only thing, like I think the only thing we used computer graphics or effects for was to remove wires. There was no there was no special effect, explosion or anything in there other than some wire removal.
And yet there's lots of wires in there deliberately.
And then we
It's got that analog, old school marionette feel to it.
and well, that's the thing is like every puppeteer had a different quality or different, skill level, and some of them were good for certain kind of shots and not. But because we were shooting however many scenes at the same time, I mean, like we would go from video village to video village, we would go from studio to studio, and then dailies were coming in as we were shooting. I mean, so Bill and I would be going to dailies at Culver, and this is how fast he'd look at me and he said, "So did you cut the scene we're going to shoot tomorrow?" Like it was that fast. I had to be that ahead. But yeah, I think we were trying to sort of, the spirit of it was, again, back to that professional guerrilla filmmaking thing where all hands on deck. We had our core group from South Park. Scott Rudin was the producer who was excellent. And then we had all these amazing craftsmen, the Kyoto brothers who did all the puppets. And then we had, like I said, some guys from who worked on Star Wars and stuff like that who brought all their stuff. So it was, for me, it was basically just, again, a bunch of kids playing in a sandbox and sort of bringing film back to the way that it was, where we were losing some sort of touch and sensitivity to the guts of what filmmaking was about. And so I think that's where, again, Trey and Matt and myself would go to Trey's and watch. We would get like a GI Joe and a Barbie and act out the scenes and do the tracking and blocking and just kind of scene layout just to kind of see if it worked. And yeah, so I think we are all basically getting our hands dirty with this exciting thing because we are doing a genre that hadn't been done since the 60s or 70s and never certainly on a full screen like that. So I think people were sort of curious about what we were up to. I think this was part of the second of a three-picture deal with Paramount that Matt and Trey had. And we were doing something different. And I think that just sort of was our thing at the time, that Paramount really liked us. And I think that we were trying to obviously give something that was of quality and in respect to the Thunderbirds. There's this big hero shot of them walking down the hall, and there's this line dangling as they're walking. I told Matt, I'm like, we can't do this. Or Trey was like, we can't do this. And I'm like, no, let's leave it in. And I think it's like we did these little things to sort of remind people of the scale and of
Yeah.
the puppets and stuff. So yeah.
So in terms of the comedy and the satire, was there anything that was sort of shot or even scripted that you saw which hasn't made it into the film because it was kind of considered too risque, or maybe the studio nixed it at the last minute?
I think like with anything, it was sort of the gore. We did a lot of puppet shooting, and I think there was one with Janine Garofalo's head blows off and Susan Sarandon. Like I think they were reacting to that. Although the sex scene, I'm pretty sure that everything got in the film. I mean, like I said, there was about 800 or 900 pages. I'm not sure how much we overshot if we did. I think because of the time we were given a pretty small budget for a feature film. I think it was like 3 million or something. what was going on with the writing and stuff is we would always try to get away with as much as we could. And I think that was very much seen in like the South Park movie. We used a dildo a couple times with Saddam, and we had to do this like negotiation game with Paramount at the time and said, we were sort of negotiating battle and violence for sex. And I think when this one, we had the sex scene with Gary and Lisa at Mount Rushmore, and we were basically went through the Kama Sutra book and did all the poses. Like I think the one that we started getting questionable was like pile driver, and there was some scat, and I think this, I don't know if the scat and the pee made it in the sex scene, but that was part of it. And so that was sort of set some alarm bells to Paramount, and that was the first sort of censorship that we saw. And the head of Paramount actually came over, who had worked with like Marilyn Monroe and Clark Gable and all these people, and I was still in the I mean, we were just in our over our heads in the film, and he's like, he wanted a private screening, and he walks in with a cigar, and me and him, he didn't want Trey and Matt, he just wanted me, and he went through the thing, and he's like, "Oh, beautiful. This is great, Tom. I love what you're doing. This is awesome." And then we get to the sex scene. He goes, "Can you stop right now?" And I like hit pause or stop. And he's like, "Can we talk about this?" And he's like, "Why would you ruin such a great film, satire, comedy with this sex scene?" He goes, "It doesn't make any sense." So he just basically kind of, that was it. He left. And then a few weeks later, he called me from a speakerphone at MPAA. He was getting our film rated, and he had made me write down every shot in order on the sex scene, how many frames it was, the technical stuff, and then what the position was. And so I had to do on speakerphone with the MPAA, tell them, okay, shot number one is heavy petting. It's on for 20 frames and da 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 da. And then I could hear the chuckles go as I went through. But it was when I got to the pile driver was when the room exploded. And I think he was just sort of having a laugh with me to sort of show me how ridiculous this thing we were making. But we ended up getting, I believe, an R rating. But one of the things, to Trey and Matt's credit, is that they were able to write around a lot of that stuff. And I think that was just something after 5 years or so on South Park that we got good at innuendo and sort of playing the sort of the finer points of satire, to kind of get away with as much. I really don't think there's anything in the film that is missed. I think there was a question of whether Spotswood would going to go down on Gary or not. I think that was a big conversation. That was, uh, yeah. But other than that, I think we got kind of everything in we wanted. So,
Yeah, well, watching the film again recently, well, it's first of all, it's still incredibly funny, but I'm also struck by how opposite the of say the first scene is in regards to just the American jingoism, the gung ho attitude, the total destruction and disregard for life, civilian life, culture. Um, I just
well, that's America, right?
well, so there's crying out for a sequel already. If it got greenlit today, I don't know what I mean. So yeah, what do you feel about that in terms of maybe there should be a second one, maybe there should be a follow-up, maybe this film plays equally today as it did 20 odd years ago, given the
Well,
current geopolitical situation that we're facing.
yeah, firstly, I'm really proud of the film that we made. We were trying to beat an election at that point. I think it was Bush's second term that was going up. We also had a series for another South Park season coming up. But in the film, what I think we did great in the opening scene was sort of, there was a lot of misdirects because you're walking into a puppet movie, and you're not sure how this is going to last for 90 minutes. And I think that we obviously had to use quicker paced editing. I think there was tighter, a lot more camera movements. We had way more cameras to choose from than obviously on South Park. Um, but the way that we started the film was kind of how we set the pace and the structure, like similar to South Park movie. You want to understand what you're in the first 5 minutes or so, and we gotta win you over. We have to make you laugh in the first 5 minutes. We have to understand the thesis or uh, the point of the film. And so what we did is, I think, basically to play on Paramount's fears, we started the opening scene with just a rough, really basic puppeteering another puppet. And and I think people when they see that, they're like, "Oh, really?" And then you pull out and you see this majesty of Paris, which is like everything from the cobblestones to the Eiffel Tower to the fountains and everything. And and as the thing went on, you kind of were sort of unsure. I think it's a little kid walking down the street singing Frere Jacques, and then the Bin Laden character-ish comes in. But basically we were again treating it like a regular full-on film, and I think that you know the devices of how the whole thing was basically that the team was going to be like American foreign policy, where we had good intentions, but we kind of screwed things up, or we weren't fully educated on the ramifications of what was going to happen based on our actions. So this movie is to sort of, again, to kind of be a microcosm of American foreign policy at the time. And as you mentioned, it's very holds true today. Um, so I feel like the movie was very, very difficult to make. The last month of the film, I'm not exaggerating, we were working 20 hours a day, 7 days a week. So there was like a 4 hour self-time, whatever. But it basically was so difficult that I think that I'd love to do a sequel because I'm again really proud of it. I think we said a lot of cool things in that, and I think basically, um, yeah, I think that having the sort of the opening scene be the kind of the litmus for the film, like you could see you know, again, it's sort of like back to Bill Pope wanting to just do everything in camera and have fun with it. And I think that was the thing that kept the the energy going in the film was just overall excitement, even though it was difficult. I would love to do, I think there was at the time talk of doing one, but now I'm not sure if that will happen. But yeah, I'd love to do another one. Yeah,
Tom, that's terrific. So nice to meet you. Thanks so much for sharing. Team America, well pleased with us on Ace Cinema Editors, Cuts We Love. Thank you so much.
thank you.